Uh, I got this one all to myself today. Unfortunately, Greta couldn't join us for this afternoon's session. Excuse me. I'm Tom Church, and I am a massage therapist, performance therapist, and running coach up in the Boston area. And thank you for joining the Athlete Performance Mastery Summit. This afternoon, we are speaking with athletic trainer and future dad, Matt Devens. Matt joined New York University in 2014 as an athletic trainer, and primarily working with the Violets men's soccer, women's basketball, and men's and women's cross country and track and field teams. Matt came to NYU after 3 years serving as the head athletic trainer at NYU Poly from 2011 to 2014, where he oversaw training services for 14 NCAA sports. Excuse me. And from 2010 to 2011, he worked with the Brooklyn Aviators of the Federal Hockey League as a team's athletic trainer. Matt graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in exercise science from Southern Connecticut State University in 2006. He served there as an athletic trainer in 2007, working primarily with the cross-country track and field teams. Matt then went on to earn a master's degree in exercise physiology from Long Island University, Brooklyn in 2009. An active member of the New York running community, Matt has volunteered with the National Scholastic Athletic Foundation since 2007, serving as an athletic trainer and medical director for regional, national, and international track and field events. His volunteering resume includes stints with the New York City Marathon and New York City Triathlon as a lifeguard. So what distance races do you compete in?
Sorry, say it again?
What distance races do you compete in?
Yeah, so now I primarily do longer distances. I try to do at least one half marathon every year. I'll jump into some 5Ks here and there. But I started my running career doing middle distance, and then whatever really the team needed me to do in high school and in junior high school, from the hurdles to the steeplechase to whatever they needed a person on the relay. So I was pretty adaptive early on, and I was it made it pretty interesting. I got a broad spectrum of experience early on.
Was running your only sport early on, or do you have other experiences?
No, I think as a kid in this area, New York, Long Island, Little League baseball is pretty popular. I did that for a bit. I was involved with the PAL track team. Grew up on the water, so always swimming and doing water sports. So I got into the swim team locally. Seasonally, I would do that. I would bike quite a bit, never competitively, but I'd do a bit of road biking. And then in junior high, I did a little bit of wrestling. I had a couple of brothers growing up, so wrestling came natural. So did wrestling, and then really in high school, my brother had already had some success in track, so I kind of just followed in his footsteps.
And did you have any history of injuries, or you stayed pretty healthy?
For the most part, I stayed pretty healthy. I think the thing about high school is when you first have that smallest little injury, it kind of shocks you, and you're not used to feeling any pain at all, outside your norm. And that's really when I did have like a muscle strain in my calf, and it could have been a stress injury. It's hard to say how it really came about, maybe overtraining. And that's kind of what brought my focus into athletic training from high school. I didn't have a lot of injuries. I never really had trouble recovering from workouts until I'd say a junior year. I had this muscle strain. Maybe it was a stress fracture or a stress reaction in my shin, and it took me out for a few weeks, maybe a month or so. and I went to a physical therapist, and just kind of went in with an open mind, and absolutely loved the field. Um, Outside of that, I've really just been learning how to take care of myself, and then applying that to what I preach and teach. I think that's really unique with sports medicine, and maybe medicine in general. You can train yourself, and practice certain habits, and move from one um, uh, practice to the next, and training, and learn from it, and move on, speak from experience. I kind of like to be open-minded, try new things, be adaptive.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot over the days of the summit with the various speakers, is that the adaptability and what we pick up from just our own experiences as athletes and the athletes that we work with really broadens our knowledge, and really ends up, we end up giving that back to our patients and clients. So was your initial experience with physical therapy and athletic trainers what brought you into becoming an ATC?
Yeah, I would say so. I actually didn't have any idea what sports medicine was until I probably saw it on like a college application somewhere along the line. But I was interested in physical therapy early on, and then as soon as I learned what sports medicine was, that really took my focus. That would have been like the late junior year into senior year of high school. And then I just kind of started doing my own research on what it was. And obviously orthopedics is a big part of it. And since then, the field has kind of expanded in my experience outside of orthopedics. But early on, I took interest in anatomy, physiology. And I really wanted to help people with the experiences that I had. The adaptive learning that I took on myself, and I used to help the other kids on the high school team. We didn't have an athletic trainer in our school, so anything I would learn from the running camps that I went to, or the group running teams I was on, kind of anything I learned, I would kind of regurgitate that to them, and maybe was an early athletic trainer before I actually became one professionally.
It sounds familiar. We were kind of the same way with our school. The coaches were kind of had that years of experience being around the athletes and what they had to deal with, and trying to figure out how to deal with it. And then I think the athletes just passed along that information to the younger kids as you went along, and that's how word spread. So now with COVID-19 causing the cancellation of fall NCAA collegiate championships, what are you doing?
That's a great question. Honestly, it's been very tough on my athletes. I think there's a lot of unknowns. There have been a lot of unknowns, and we prepared for that. Going after the spring season was canceled, which was pretty unfortunate. We had some teams that could have competed on the national level, between wrestling, track and field, volleyball. They could have gone to the national tournaments. And we had a chance to buckle down and get started on our summer projects, which we often do through June and July. We started on those in April, and that our focus was how to prepare for the fall under the circumstances. And the circumstances obviously have constantly been changing. So we tried to prepare for many different circumstances on what they would allow us to do. And we kind of took whatever the NCAA said with a grain of salt. We have to adapt to whatever the New York State government says, and also nationally what they say to follow. So what we've been able to do over the last few months is put together a series of pre-participation physical questions added to our normal questionnaire that would help trace someone that may have come down with COVID-19. And what we did find was we actually had a lot of athletes that did. New York City was a hotspot early on.
Mm-hmm.
And like a lot of those students just left campus and went home in March and April and didn't necessarily report back to us and the medical staff. So when we got in touch with them over the summer, we were able to start narrowing our questionnaires and our search and figure out really how to help them recover from that and prepare themselves for training through the summer and into the fall. So we came up with policies and procedures to follow based on our early questions to our athletes, the experiences that they had, and the big picture in the city. So what our system looks like now is that we won't be starting on-campus activities in any capacity until September 1st. Typically, we'll start 2 weeks prior to that. Actually, it would be going on right now, our preseason. It would be like 12 to 16-hour days right now. So this is a big change for us. We will be bringing teams back. Fall teams is the priority first. We'll be doing 5, 10, 15 people at a practice, depending on the practice space. Now, we do practice in New York City. A lot of the times, the spaces that we use are either inside, small, or small parks in the area. Any of the big fields that we prefer have not been able to be provided to us at the moment. They're kind of open spaces for the public, we can't like reserve them. So we have to be adaptive in that. So it's going to be pretty, it's hard to take a 30-person soccer team and run a 2-hour practice, 5 people at a time or 10 people at a time. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to do that. We're not going to have any competitions through the fall, unfortunately, but we're going to try to give our college students the athletic experience that they deserve under the circumstances. And for us, it's most importantly keeping them healthy, and it doesn't just include their muscles and bones. It includes the COVID-19 and other airborne viruses that can play a factor.
It sounds like you're going to be busy no matter what. Whether you're dealing with competitions and injuries through those, or now with the virus and just in general keeping them healthy. Do you think this could provide opportunity to maybe get them to a healthier level?
Yeah, I think the biggest disconnect between the athlete and the athletic trainer and their training is knowing their own health and well-being, right? So what we learned was that we should be asking more specific questions and asking them in a way that can help the incoming student and athlete learn a little bit more about themselves before they report to us. So, for example, we don't ever ask questions about viruses. We might ask about their medical history, but we don't ask specific questions. We're used to hearing, broken bones, pulled muscles, and in recent years, concussions have broadened our horizon as well. We've focused our questions more on mental health too. So we're ever expanding the sports medicine field, and hopefully by making ourselves more prepared, we can better prepare our student athletes.
Excellent. So you talk about all the questions you're asking of the athletes, but when an athlete comes in to a college sports medicine clinic, maybe for the first time as a freshman, what are you expecting from them? This is a new level of care for them. So what questions should they ask? What should they know?
Well, I think the most important thing for an athlete, whatever level they are coming out of high school, they're usually 16 to 20 years old, right? That's really the range. that we get them, whether they're a first year's athletes right out of high school, or maybe they've done 2 years someplace else and they're transferring in. They can still be a new athlete. So the biggest thing is to be open-minded. It's important for a student athlete to be open-minded and willing to learn. I mean, that's why you're in college in the first place, right? You're supposed to be learning. You're going to get stronger. You're at a transition period in your life. Your body's going to be changing. And professionals like myself and some of my colleagues, the varsity performance coach, strength coaches, the sports coaches, we're all there to get you to that place. A lot of times it's the willingness of the athlete to help them get there that lacks. And look, we are all very stubborn in a lot of ways, and especially when we find success in a certain way of doing things, we're not always adaptive to change that. But if a student athlete can come in with an open mind on the first day and be receptive to what we can do to help them, they're going to find success. So that would be my biggest piece of advice: is be a little bit humble, come in with an open mind, and ask specific questions until you get the answer that you need. It's not necessarily what you're looking for, but it's what you need for your body.
Great advice, and I hope they learn this and follow it. So in a college setting, you're often the first line of medical care for college athletes. Diagnosing, treating, what are the range of injuries you tend to see?
We see all kinds of things. We do. We see all kinds of things. We like to. We don't shy away from any injuries, even if they don't happen with the sport. If they're our athlete and they happen while they're cycling to class, we still take care of them. So we see all kinds of things, from acute fractures to chronic, wear and tear injuries. We see a broad range of things, and still seeing more, with COVID and with concussions. We're learning every day. My specific sports that I work with all the athletes in the athletic training room during the open hours. But when I get to be on the field with the athletes and on the sidelines, for soccer, depending on the surface area that we're training on, I might see, some lower body chronic injuries, shin splints or stress reactions. We also might see an ACL tear here or there, or a meniscal tear. Unfortunately, these things happen, but we try to set up our strength and conditioning programs to prepare them for those things. And a lot of times we'll see in preseason, since the training does change for every sport, from coming from your summer training to maybe more volume and 2-a-days, we see a lot of hip flexor and a lot of hamstring strains. And those are things that we've changed our summer training programs to incorporate. So a broad range of injuries, but ones that we try to get our grasp on full circle back to, when they're going into the summer and doing their spring training. We try to take care of those things early on.
So I know that you're, what you do doing it in the clinic space, on the sidelines, stuff like that. There's a lot of different things, but I think everybody's first thought when they think of a athletic trainer is all the taping you do. How much of your life is spent taping?
Listen, I actually enjoy taping. I think there's a place for it. I think it works really well. I think that if you're going to do, for example, ankles, we must tape hundreds a week in preseason for soccer. For ankles, if you're going to do the rehab exercises that we assign to help strengthen your ankles, putting the tape on it also is going to be beneficial to you. If you're just going to depend on the ankle taping, or for that matter, any joint taping, it's not going to be beneficial for you. You're going to become a little bit weaker. You're not going to gain as much. I try to do both. I try to do a pretty strong strength and conditioning program to prevent the injury. I try to do a good rehab program after the injury, and I try to move them away from the tapings as soon as I can, so that their ankles can be strong for practice. And then look, if we're going to play a game where it's going to be really aggressive, and I know you have chronic ankle issues, I might tape them up for that. So I find when I have visiting teams, I tape half of the other team and my team 2 or 3 guys, because that's just their athletic trainer does it one way and I do it another way. So I do think there's a place for it. I just think that we can't depend on it.
Right. And it sounds like you're doing, trying to do more of the preventative stuff for rehabbing. Like you said, making sure the athletes are keeping themselves stronger, taking care of the injuries.
Right. Look, you're gonna get acute injuries and even chronic injuries. Sometimes they're not preventable, but in a lot of ways they are preventable. And it's hard to prepare yourself for what could happen in a game. You don't know what way a guy's gonna come and tackle you. You don't know if you're on a cross country trail, how you're gonna have to cut and turn around a route, or a tight corner, and you might roll an ankle, you might cut a knee out. So in preparing for those things, I think that's where a lot of our incoming freshmen are behind, because they don't really know to do the little things: strengthen your hamstrings, strengthen your posterior chain, and develop stronger core. Work on your athletic posture and your running posture. Not just do 100 abs. There's a lot of ways to keep yourself strong as an athlete and healthy before you even come into a situation you might get hurt in.
Right. So as you're saying, your role, you have the role of keeping the athletes playing. You're talking about some already, but what are the various things you do in the clinic space, active practice site, at competitions? Just what are those different roles that you do, even outside just keeping them healthy? What are those roles you do in those various spaces as an athletic trainer?
So I think you're kind of getting the gist that I'm very preventative in my tactics. I think that's very, very important. Preparing someone for circumstances that you're aware of is very, very important. Knowing that your preseason is going to be 2-a-days, whether that's a workout in the long run or 2 on-field workouts, or a scrimmage. So knowing how the practices are set up are super important for me and my staff, and communication with the coaches is important for that, so that the athletes can stay in the game. So I think a lot of my practice entails preparation, getting the student athletes on a routine, making sure they know technique for stretching, increasing blood flow to the muscles, increasing the heart rate to a point where they're prepared for even just the skill warm-ups. So developing an early on routine with coming in, rolling out for a half an hour before, stretching, then getting out to the field and doing some light jogging, and then coming back and doing some more active isolated stretching. I do a lot of partner stretching, and then start the technical drills. A lot of times incorporating simple body movements into those drills are really important. So I talk with assistant coaches on how to develop the warm-up, sport specific, and also trending around injury prevention for those sports. And once you get into the meat of the season, you're going to have, everybody gets a little bit tougher. Everybody gets a little bit more tolerant of pain here and there. So it's all maintenance. I encourage my athletes to come in and maintain themselves. So it goes from preventative to maintaining their health. You know, you're going to have in any given game an elbow to the knee, or someone's going to undercut your ankles, or you're going to have someone who rolled their ankle in a cross country race. Whatever it is, those things are not necessarily preventable, but they have to learn how to deal with the pain that they have and have a quick turnaround for practice or a game the next day. So we do a lot of ice baths. We do a lot of we do Normatex, which is a popular one these days. I think that's trending. We also do cupping, which is very popular, and it's really, those things do benefit athletes in their recovery, but you know, an athlete has to find out what works best for them, and it's not necessarily the preferred one. Since we have the Normatex, people prefer to do that, but is that actually going to help you? So I always lean towards getting in an ice bath after a couple of hard practices, shaking your legs out on an off day, maybe going for a walk, maybe a bike ride, things like that are really where I focus my athletic training room attention.
All right. So when you do have that injured athlete, how do you handle that fine line of when an athlete is able to perform or should rest and recover?
That's a really good question. I think it's very subjective, right? Everybody's going to recover differently from things. You also get a lot of heroes, right? You got a lot of guys and girls that want to be out there no matter what their condition is. And I have to reel those people in and be like, okay, listen, you're going to put yourself at risk. If you just take a couple days off, there's no shame in that. And let's get you healthy for, you know, the next game, not necessarily this game. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really important that people are just more aware of how to prepare themselves and take some time to recover, and know when to slow themselves down and know when to ask for help to maybe get themselves back sooner.
So educator or teacher is definitely a role of yours.
Yeah, definitely. I think the more information that I can give you on how to take care of yourself, the better off you're going to be. So I always encourage questions, and I try to explain every treatment that I'm doing to the athlete while I'm doing it, so they're aware of what we're doing to them. I don't like, and I think it's a bad habit these days, people are on their phones in the athletic training room, or while they're getting treatment, they're talking to their friend. And I think it's really important that they take a couple minutes to recover themselves, focus on their body. And if I'm, you know, pushing some fluid out of an ankle, or, you know, taking a knot out of someone's back, or doing an ultrasound, or even an e-stim, self-awareness in that moment is huge with recovery. And then also learning what those feelings are of recovery when they're happening, more in tune with yourself and more in tune with getting yourself to the next level. So education is huge. It's absolutely the most important thing, being open-minded, learning, and ready to change.
Yeah. It sounds like it'd be helpful to have Claudia standing on the sidelines. Coding space.
Claudia is fantastic with this. She's actually one of my mentors in learning this method.
Yep. This is someone that we're talking to on Wednesday, the muscular therapist. So we might get into her tactics on the sidelines sports medicine. And but in the meantime, back to you. Could you talk more about your return to play protocols? Just kind of protocols, or really depends on what the injury is?
It definitely depends on the injury. It also depends on the person, and oftentimes it depends on the circumstances. If there's, like, it's risk and reward, right? If there's a high reward and a decent amount of risk, it's a conversation with the doctor. Let's just say we're trying to expedite the recovery time for, say, a shoulder injury, for, say, a wrestler, and they're going for nationals. Well, you know, there's a good chance they're going to be in a position to compromise that shoulder if they were supposed to be back in, you know, 8 weeks from whatever injury it was, we're trying to get them back in 7. There's a risk there. Are they willing to take on that risk? Is the medical staff going to prepare them in a way to get them ready? So it really is subjective, and it's also it has to do with the sport, the time of year. But I would say, generally speaking, it's important to be aware of what the injury was and how it happened in the first place. Okay. Super important to just have as much information as possible, and knowing what the athlete's going to experience going forward. What level they're going to be at. Does the team you're playing know that they have any injury? If you're going to wrap it up, is that safer for them, or is it going to put them more at risk? But as far as protocols go, I always have written protocols. I always have things written, but they're never in stone. For say an ACL recovery, it's 6, 9, sometimes 12 months recovery, right? Depending on how serious the damage is. And I've had a lot of athletes that are 2-3 weeks ahead of schedule, after 6 weeks, and then they slow down. It's just the way their body changes and adapts to the stimulus that we're giving it. And then we have people that are slow to start and recover faster. So it's important to just be prepared and ever changing. But I do have things written in stone. It's really my recovery protocols are really important. They're consistent. My stretching routine is super important. I do active isolated stretching, increasing blood flow. And recently we do a lot of mindfulness as well. Mind-body recovery.
So you're trying to hit more and more elements of the being.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, and we know we've heard this a lot previously the last few days, is that it really is individualized on how quick or slow recovery is.
It is, and a lot of frustration can come with that. It's normal to go through the phases of depression and denial and frustration. All those things are normal, in any given recovery. It's just a matter of which one is going to take more time before you can move on to the next one. So I think it's just develop a relationship with your medical staff and be ready to work every day in getting back to the goal. Write your goals down and keep your athletes focused.
Yeah, absolutely. So changing, taking a little shift here. You have a number of years working as part of the NSAF sports medicine team. What has that experience been like for you?
So NSAF has been fantastic for me. I was able to start with them, God, was it 13 years ago now? And there are a lot of different medical professionals in that medical staff from all walks of life, all different kinds of sports, all different age categories. And because of how expansive that group resume is, there is so many areas you can learn. And I was able to learn from, we talked about Claudia, I learned from Dr. Mason, different techniques that are used around the country, different methods of treatment, patience, different types of resilience, learning from people's experiences. Whenever we get that group of people together, we're always bouncing stories off of one another. We're always calling each other over to check out how you would treat this injury and how you saw success with that injury. And I think everybody in that sports medicine staff has benefited, therefore benefiting every athlete that we get to work with at those events, and then bringing that knowledge home with them to their teams and their athletes. And I love the coaches that come in and ask questions and want to know what's best for them. Because if you're standing there with 3 of us in the room, you're going to get 3 completely different experiences on the same topic, and you're going to get a lot of knowledge on that. So I encourage, if you're at any of those events, to come in and talk to us.
Yeah, it's been wonderful and fascinating, and looking forward to when we get to go back and do it again, do some more of it. So
Yeah.
I know previous college athletes that have been through the training room, still called the training room?
Yeah. You know, we do call it the training room. I think there's been a push in the last 10 years to call ourselves athletic trainers, which I think is very important, and to call it the athletic training room. You know, we make a quick reference to it called the ATR, and that works well enough. But, you know, there is, I think, a language gap between people that don't know what the training room can offer when it's not called an athletic training room.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people just don't know whether they're coming from, you know, a lower level like high school into college, or they're coming from, you know, an international setting. They don't know that an athletic therapist in, say, Canada is the same thing as an athletic trainer in America. So we try to bridge the gap on those, and we push athletic training as much as we can. But you say trainer, you might as well be saying Matt. I look that way as fast as anyone, and it's just instinct.
So people that have come into the ATR I've talked to some people that just felt like they haven't received good care. You mentioned this, where you get different levels of you get other teams coming in, and just seeing that probably the athletes are probably getting different amounts of care than you give. So it sounds like your clinic is different in that regard. But looking forward into the future of the athletic training room, what could it be?
What could it be improved?
Improvements, changes. Where do you see the athletic training room going forward?
Well, there's a lot of things I touched on already that we can expand into, between mental health and concussions, and, you know, the diseases. Obviously, pre-participation physicals are super important. But I think a lot of the frustration from athletes when dealing with athletic trainers is they're dealing with athletic trainers that are often overworked and sometimes underpaid. They have a lot to do in a short amount of time. They're often rushed to do what they need to do. And I think it's important to, if you need help in something, to take the time to work out when that person that can give you that help is available to get it, so they can focus on you. And it might not be 10 minutes before you're about to get out to practice. That's the worst. When my athletes come in 10 minutes before the bus is leaving for a game, I'm like, when am I going to help you? There's no time to do that. 3 of you come in at the same time. No, you need to set up a time with me at another time and place, and we will focus on this, and we will get to the bottom of it. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement in the field itself, in allowing for individual attention, individual focus on injuries, and not necessarily just like a rotating door. Come in, you go out, come in, you go out. It needs to be one-on-one attention, so that someone can actually benefit from the services that athletic trainers provide. And the unique thing about athletic trainers, especially in my experience at the different levels I was at, whether it was the professional hockey team to the high school athletes I work with at the camps and NSAF events, to the college athletes, they're all coming from different places, but when they're willing to learn, they're in a transition period in their life. When we're in sport, we're in a transition period in our season. The more you're willing to learn in that moment, the better off you're going to be. Patience is so important. Patience to learn despite the frustration of your injury, but when you're talking to the right person, you're going to get the information. You just have to have patience on both sides of the conversation.
So all those athletes and coaches out there, some really good advice here. Excellent. So that is it for my questions, but it looks like the audience has some questions for you. I don't have time to kind of organize these in any kind of order, so I'm just going to go through them and see what we got here. So the first one is, how do you feel about virtual meets?
Okay, so I'm not really sure what that entails. Does that mean you're running your event, say, individually at a track, and then you're sending your results in? I'm not sure. Or virtual, like, rehab sessions?
I believe this person is talking about, we're starting to see track meets showing up that, or races happening where the athletes are, have their own location where they're, whether it's a
Right.
road race and just kind of creating your own course, or if it's a track meet where they're, they have athletes at different locations.
Right. Yeah. So I've seen this too, and I think given the current circumstances, the opportunity to compare times is beneficial for the athlete. Knowing that, well, the thing is with track and field, you're racing the clock in a lot of ways, and the other people on the track with you are going to help you get the time that you need and want, right? So in that sense, it's great to have an opportunity to do that. Although when you're not at a meet and not able to talk to someone in person, as an athletic trainer, I like being one-on-one with them, so that I can give them the attention that they need in that moment. And I think coaches would say the same thing. There's a lot to be said for, just getting hands-on with an injury and having them stand up, make a movement, observe that movement, and get back on the table and then work with them. So in my experience, when I'm at a track meet, I offer a lot of care that's going to go outside of that moment of at the track meet. And I do that with NSAF athletes all the time.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So I think in person is way better, but given the circumstances, this is what we have. Don't forget that we're going to get back to in person, and don't forget how much you miss the experience of being surrounded by other athletes and coaches and other knowledge.
Yeah. I have a feeling that athletes aren't going to forget what it's like to compete against others face to face. So no worries there.
You say that, but I think the first chance we get, people are going to come out way more aggressive than before, and maybe a little bit under experienced and under trained. So I think the injuries are going to pile up.
Yeah, that's probably true. All right, next one. Could you review and explain the maintenance and recovery step?
Yeah. So you may be familiar with RICE, rest, ice, compression, and elevation. That is a textbook way of dealing with things, but we've expanded on that too. I think I like to recover on the move. That's what I always say, whether it's in between sets and workouts and in between races, or in between days of games and workouts. Get up, get your body moving. We're creatures of movement. So the more you sit down and the longer you sit and rest after, the less your body has to recover. Yeah, sleep is super important, obviously, but take that rest when your body needs it, and sleep 8-10 hours after an event. And eating is super important, so make sure you adhere to the guidelines for eating. But recovery is, for me, I always express movement. Cross training, runners jump on a bike, soccer players jump on a bike, cyclists get in a pool, runners get in a pool, wrestlers get in a pool, swimmers get on a bike. I mean, switch it up.
Yep. Have you heard of Peace and Love? It's kind of the latest iteration of injury recovery.
And I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, I'll share that on the Facebook page later on today. Next question. What is your knowledge around cramping? What are your thoughts on cramping? Is there muscle damage that happens with a cramp?
I think what's happening at the muscular level, cellularly, there's dehydration, and the body is in a point of locking up that area to protect it. If you try to push through a cramp when it's not ready to relieve itself, you're going to tear the muscle, or you're going to tear muscles around it. Because what happens with a cramp is that the muscle fibers tighten up, and when they're locked up like this, the other ones around it are going to try to make up for the difference of tensile tissue, and something is going to give. So a lot of times it's dehydration, it's malnourishment, or acutely in the short term, it could be just overuse, and I do a lot of rolling out. I do a lot of deep tissue massage. I teach those methods to my athletes so they can do them on their own. I will use e-stim when necessary. I like to use heat at certain times. I like to use ice and cold methods at certain times. But again, joint mobility, using the full length of the muscle, whether it's a double, two joint or one joint muscle, opening it up to the full range as far as it can go, increasing blood flow is going to get the best recovery from a cramp.
All right. Do you use infrared warmth, TENS, other?
Yeah, so our modalities do include TENS units. I do use infrared. I have been using the laser a little bit more. I think all these things, all these different tools are great. They go into my treatment plethora of treatments, and I'll dig into them. When one thing doesn't work, I'll jump onto the next one. And as I said before, some things work for one athlete, and some things work for one athlete for a month, and then we have to switch it up. So I do think those things have a place, but I will never stick with one thing. Just like with training throughout a season, I change up the recovery methods and the modalities that I use, so that we keep the body guessing. Whether they're successful or not, I'll make sure I start rotating through some other methods.
Excellent. I like that keeping the body guessing part. I think it's like training itself. After you get past that kind of base phase, you want to switch things up just so you can find different ways for the body to stress the body so it gets stronger.
Yeah, and in my experience with athletes recently, I had some athletes come in with injuries from high school, and they say they've tried everything. So we tried some new things, then we went back to the old things, and then we kind of get stuck in this rut. We're like, well, why is none of this stuff working? We need to take a step back, and then back again, and back again, until we can see the big picture, and then approach it with an open mind and try to be specific. So a lot of times, if you have pain in your shin, the issue isn't necessarily in your shin. It could be from your ankle. It could be a leg length discrepancy. And you're not going to resolve that injury until you address the bigger picture. And that's very important to be aware of. And you may not even know that. You might be constantly pulling your left hamstring and you have no idea why. Well, maybe there's a muscle imbalance somewhere. Maybe there's a weak lower back issue. So everything's connected. The little pain in your toe could be from a back problem that you have.
Right. Since you just mentioned shin issues, looks like our last question is going to be, is there anything kind of more recent science-wise with shin pain prevention, maintenance, treatment? strengthening, or is
Uh,
that kind of just go
so,
ahead?
so like for, it doesn't matter the sport you're in. Shin pain is often a chronic injury that everyone is going to experience at some time. And it's because we, when we need to do explosive movements, we utilize our calf for that explosive movement, and the other side of the calf, which is a big, muscle, the gastric and soleus, the two joint big muscles, is a string of very small muscles on the other side that are supposed to compensate for that movement, as an alternative muscle group, the shin. So there's a lot to prepare for yourself with shins. I think that utilizing plyometrics in your training is super preventative. Landing soft, taking off under control, using the full length of your chain. So getting low into a squat to take off when you're jumping, and then so say practice squat jumps is a great plyometric exercise for learning how to take off and then land. Um, Dealing with shin pain, a lot of times the muscles are getting tight because there's a lot of impact on the joints below and above, right? So the muscles get super tight, and when the muscles get tight, it starts pulling on the bone. The tissue pulls on the bone, and it causes a stress injury, a stress fracture, oftentimes. And that early on, when you start getting that shin pain, you can start digging out those muscles in the shin, rolling out the calves. A lot of my athletes, I ask them to strengthen their hip flexors and strengthen their hamstrings to rotate the hips back into place.
Mm-hmm.
For runners, lifting your knee a little bit higher on each step, so your leg can kick out and get another half an inch per step. And then you're going to utilize coming down in that forward step. You're going to utilize the ankle a little bit better, and then the knee, and then the hip in recovering from that movement. So I think big picture, look at your body mechanics, and then treatment wise, utilize a wide range of things from massaging early in the pain. Don't just assume it's a fatigue and you're going to recover tomorrow. Rolling out, massaging your muscles is very important. And then I always do, I revert back to blood flow, active isolated stretching, PNF stretching, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, which is pushing your muscle to a point of discomfort, holding it for only 2 seconds, and then backing off, and then flexing that muscle. So it increases blood flow to that area. So between those things, I think there's definitely room to prevent some shin pain, which is a super frustrating injury.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, I think we've all experienced it, or we haven't. We may in our future. So, and you could probably talk extensively on every other part of the body also, but we are going to call it a day. So this has been wonderful. Hearing from you, hearing the perspective as the athletic trainer, anybody that's read a book that has an ATC in it, they're always looked at as the kind of that role model, or that mentor, or so many different kind of titles or positions that they take in people's lives. So thank you for joining us.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
All right. So we're going to.
Good luck.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.
I'll catch you later.